Welcome on the Icelandic beach. I'm here in the Eyrarbakka, wonderful place, and I'd like to answer some of your questions. What is this stiffness thing in regards to bicycles? Frames, forks, handlebars perhaps also, for sure, and the wheels. It seems like anything we read about the bikes on some catalogs, on websites, some descriptions of those manufacturers, they will say we have stiffer this, we have stiffer that, and it works better, and so on. So what actually means that we have a stiff bike? Because it can be good, it can be bad. First thing, for beginners, we are not talking about our suspension. So we are not talking about stiffness of the fork, for example, or the rear shock, the damper. So it's not about how easy the fork or the rear shock will react to some bumps. It's not about that. The stiffness means how stiff the chassis of our bicycle is, and it helps us with two things. Thing number one is maneuvering. For example, many manufacturers will tell you how stiff the head tube is, and perhaps also the top tube, or the whole joint here, because when we lean the bike, especially when we lean the bike, we turn and we go fast, we hit some bumps and we brake at the same time. There is many different forces that we apply to the fork, to the wheel, to the fork, and to the head tube. And so the stiffer head tube is, the more predictable your steering will be. So the bike will steer very well, unless it is too stiff. So this is really difficult thing for those brands to do a good bike. It's really difficult. So if you are experienced rider, if you have ridden many bikes, you will feel the difference when pushing hard and going just hard down the hill. The second thing we want to have stiff for the steering is the rear triangle, for example, especially on the full suspension bike, where we have so many different pivots, joints here. We want the rear end to just, keep the shape as it should be, so that it will be once more predictable and it will maneuver just as we want to. And then the second thing is our power transfer, or power loss, or efficiency, and that's pretty much connected to the bottom bracket area. So when you go to any website, any manufacturer, probably they will tell you about stiffer and lighter bottom bracket. That means when we apply force to the pedals, we apply some torsional forces to the bottom bracket, to the frame, and so we want as much of our energy to be transferred through the chain to the rear wheel. That's why we want to have this area really stiff. Now, too stiff and frame sizes, that's also complicated. One thing, beginners or newbies, it's not about the suspension, it's not about the suspension stiffness, it's about the chassis stiffness. But the bike can be too stiff, and then riding on it feels harsh. So once more, those who design bikes want the bike to be laterally stiff, torsionally stiff, but vertically compliant. That means, for example, the rear triangle being shaped in a way that will absorb some micro vibrations. So it will not just work like on the full suspension bike. So this is full suspension. There is not so much micro suspension on the frame, because we have the rear shock. If you don't have it, on the road bike, on mountain bikes, hardtails, you're gonna have some shaping here that will allow the frame to flex a little bit, only vertically, not for the torsional forces, not for the lateral forces, because that's where you want your bike to be stiff. Also, the fork should be compliant, so not too stiff. But then I really loved what D'Aluzio said. That's the man who made, for example, wonderful welds on the aluminum specialized bikes, and he said that they've made some model, it was some road bike I think, in 56 size, which was stiff and great and riders loved it, and then they made the same one in the medium size and it was just too harsh. So making different sizes is once more very difficult for bike producers, because it's not just about cutting the tubes and shortening them, but also different carbon layup, if it's carbon, different shaping on the alloy or steel, if it's some metal, so that the bike will not be too stiff, too harsh. Not only not compliant, but also you need some flexibility also for maneuvering the bike. So it's quite a complicated thing, but it's not about the suspension. It's about the frame, the chassis that is just solid, strong. You can rely on it, just like I rely and love this bike, even with the rear triangle on the full suspension bike. Very, very good. How can you compare the stiffness of different bikes? Just very, very quick tips. Very simple thing and quick is the front end. Take the tire between your legs, your knees, and apply some torsional force. Can you see? You can see that this fork isn't really torsional stiff because it does. Oh, my stem should be clamped stronger. It does flex. Well, this is not so much problem while we ride, but you will feel that this, for example, RS1 RockShox is not so stiff torsionally, but it will be stiff in this direction, and I'm gonna show you that on the different shot. See the wheel wobbling? You will feel the difference between different forks. So that's the front end. The rear end, we can do it in the same manner. Hold the wheel and apply some lateral forces. I will show you. The wheel will flex, but the frame almost doesn't flex at all because we have this boost system, really wide axle, and just solid, good pivots and retriangles. I love it. And then the final thing is, when you actually sit on the bike, you have to be sitting, not just like me. You should apply some force, some torsional force to the handlebar, keeping the saddle with your thigh in place. And you will sometimes feel, especially on the road bikes, that the top tube is actually flexing, and the handlebar against the seat position will change. So that's something you can find out. If you remember one of my bikes, it was Felt B15 or B16, the triathlon bike, which had really tiny top tube. I could feel this flex a lot. Even if I was just pedaling hard, I would feel the bike a little bit wobbling. So that's something you would not want to have on your bicycle. Even though I really loved the bike, that was the problem with the Aero super thin tubes. So now the Aero bikes don't have that thin tubes. They are a bit stiffer and more predictable. That's it. That's what I wanted to tell you. How do you check the stiffness of your bike? Let us know. See you soon. Bye bye.